All right. Hello, everybody. We're back. We're back to talk about marketing. This is really exciting. We're going to try doing a monthly marketing feature. Let's call it that. So this is really fun. And today we're going to talk about marketing and RevOps. So Alyssa, welcome back.
Yay. Hi, guys.
Yeah, or Alyssa's going to contribute once a month. So super exciting.
Yeah.
I know. I'm so excited too.
Cool. So, let's just dive right in if we want. Marketing and RevOps. I don't know. Do you have some opening thoughts, or otherwise we can just jump in? My main question is always how do you see those two groups working together? And obviously we can dissect that a bit. But otherwise, do you have any other opening thoughts?
Who do you want the opening thoughts from?
Alyssa's our marketing expert.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, oh, shut up. Let's hear Alyssa.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny. It kind of goes with our chat last time when we were talking of that unicorn person of a VP, whether they're a salesperson or a marketing person, and whether you should have both leadership roles in both places. And
Mm-hmm.
I think our conclusion was that it's a real value to have a head of each, and those two people work really well together, and their teams as a result are more connected, and there's more synergy between them. So I think it's super important for the two groups to be interconnected and to be building that core messaging that goes everywhere from inbound leads and inbound marketing efforts through the RevOps process into the sales experience, to keep that experience for your prospects consistent and true to what they got roped in with. And so it doesn't feel like they're suddenly with a different organization from what they thought they were signing up for when they were going through the business development or even the initial engagement and attraction phase of marketing.
Right.
Interesting. Hey, listen, Fab can ask a quick question.
Yeah, of course.
Do you think the same person can do both roles well, or do they often have a hard time intersecting?
I think you can have the same person doing the larger strategy role. And when it comes from a messaging perspective, I think it makes sense maybe for either two brains or one brain to be facilitating that. But I think it's a value then to have someone who's more of a marketing expert leading that side, and then more of a sales expert overseeing what that actual sales experience is for a prospect. So I don't know. I feel like everyone's kind of weighted. Most people are weighted one way or another. So there's real value in having, at least to some degree, leadership on both ends. What do you guys think?
Yeah. I mean, the reality is like as much as we need both groups, and that's where part of RevOps comes in, to be kind of unified and aligned. To use a lot of buzzwords in there, but the reality is like if you have a background in marketing, like it's going to be hard for you to understand sales. And if you have a background in sales, it's going to be really hard for you to understand marketing. And I think you're just going to come in with that hat of like, like we need more leads because you're a sales background. And if you're a marketing person, you're like, maybe we need more collateral. And you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, that's your background. So I definitely believe that there's two separate roles. I mean, they might tie back into a chief revenue officer, like somebody who does oversee both groups, but definitely two experts.
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's interesting that point of view, because I've worked under, I'm very old. I've worked a lot of people, and I've worked under people who in larger enterprises, and like you said, like a chief revenue officer to whom they both reported to, and you do generally tend to see a slant one way or the other. But to say what you and Alyssa are both saying is, yes, I think the top end can be one person, but then you have to have defined properties for both those teams, right? But I don't know. Do you guys find? I find there that what I don't like is often the marketing team thinks they're in competition with the sales, and sales thinks they're in competition with marketing, and I find that it's so silly. Like how do you? And Alyssa and Fab, I'll ask you both this question, but maybe Alyssa first. How does a company culture make sure that these teams understand that they really should be working, for the same cause in the same direction?
Yeah. It's so funny because I think about it, my history in working as a marketing person with sales, and then working as a sales kind of associated role with marketing is at Unilever, where we are dealing with large teams, quite divided, fairly siloed groups of the company. And it was always this like banging heads process where marketing was pushing down the messaging and the new product and the innovation. And the sales guys are like, wait a minute, you're dumping all this stuff on us, but my retailer doesn't care about, like, what are you doing for me at my retail level? So they live in a different place. And it was always a bit of a top-down experience, but then a push back of like, no, we're the ones actually selling the product, so we're more important. They're like, no, we're the ones who are creating the innovation, doing the messaging, and bringing consumers in, so we're more important. And it was always like this kind of situation at times. But the great thing about a small organization is that I think you can prevent that divide from the get-go as you're growing a small business or a medium-sized business, where you right away delineate what a lead looks like, when a lead becomes a prospect, and where a lead gets passed off to the sales team. And if that's like an agreed upon kind of understanding from the start that you collectively create as a group, as an organization, then you can have a smoother space where there isn't so much opposition, because you feel like you're working towards the same goal and you're just helping at different stages of that process.
Yeah. And I'll agree. I think, it's always easy to say, but ultimately it's a leadership thing, right? If the sales and the market, and like that's what you mentioned at the beginning of this, like if sales and marketing can't get along, like that'll trickle down in the teams. And having worked in marketing, having worked with sales teams, and now working with especially a lot of startups and more mid-market businesses, it's like you can right away tell when those two groups don't at the top get along. Like maybe one-on-one, like like the Google Ads person or the ads person gets along really well with the sales team and they go out for drinks afterwards. That's fine, but as a group, like you can always tell when they don't get along, and that's, dare I say, where part of RevOps comes in, where there is this overarching, like, well, this marketing campaign is great, but you're not helping the sales team with this, or how are you helping the sales team, or like, why are our definitions so different of what a lead is? And that's where that can come in, because that you have this third party coming in as fairly independent. Like a RevOps person won't care, quote unquote, what your campaign looks like, or they won't care what your cold calling script sounds like, right? They're just going to look at, is this efficient? Is this as efficient as it can be? And if I look at my marketing leads coming in and sales is not closing any, well, it's the data that's showing that there's something off. And maybe it's a sales approach, right? Maybe they don't believe marketing leads are good, or maybe it's a marketing thing where they're just targeting whoever because they have some random metric that they need to attain. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely a leadership thing. It starts from the top, unfortunately.
I think it's a culture thing. I think it's a culture thing. Like,
exactly.
If I think, you guys both know, I totally came from a sales world, and I remember in so many past lives where it was like, oh, those marketing people don't understand anything. They're not helping us out. It's like, well, hold on. I remember thinking, well, there's, because we had, who are we marketing to? What's the marketing people's mandate, right? So if their mandate is to help sales, well, that's one thing. But if their mandate's to get the marketing out there and do B2B marketing, it's a different story. So you have to stop and think about that. But I think where you're right, Fab, and it really is the leadership's role is to explain to the salespeople or the sales staff or sales RevOps, like, what is it that marketing has been mandated to do? And vice versa for the marketing people, well, what's the mandate of the salespeople? Because I remember a lot, way back when it's, those salespeople, they're always out to lunch and buying people things and screaming hurrah when we did, 30% or 50% of the work, and all they had to do was make a call. And so it's really a culture and leadership thing. So I agree with you guys. It's we often we forget that. We forget to take care of those steps to take those steps to make sure that the teams understand what the other team has to do, particularly when they're going to be, affecting each other. So
I love that. It's totally about how do you evaluate success, and that's such a great point, Paul. Like, it's true, and I think that's where smaller companies, where all of us kind of play, like we're not working for Unilever, like Procter and Gamble on a large scale. But that's where smaller companies can really do themselves a real service, where the goals are the same for both sales and marketing. You're totally right. Like when I was a marketer at a big Fortune 500, the goal was to get views, eyeballs, traction. I didn't care how many pallets were sold into Walmart, like so irrelevant to me. And I didn't get measured on success, and I didn't move up the food chain as a result of, growth at retail. I got it by, how many metrics or how many eyeballs we had. What are the terms when it was like the eyeballs in TV spots? It's evading me now, but like,
it's audience. Impression.
Audience, or like, and to some degree, we analyze Nielsen data of like how well sales overarchingly did when we did a campaign, but it wasn't related to anything on a granular level. But then also, I was partially mandated to create things like coupon creative or in-store flyer creative, and that became so secondary and irrelevant to what mattered to me in my job. But from a sales perspective, that material was hugely important. So I think for a smaller company, especially if they're offering like a food or beverage product in that regard, where they are operating with retails or B2B, where they have a number of different clients, if that goal is the same in terms of driving sales, driving revenue in a particular way, then everyone kind of recognizes the priority of their messaging and they're measured the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. It all boils down to how you judge success. And if one team's got one metric and the other team's got another metric, well, then it doesn't work out, right? So those metrics have to join. Sorry, Fab, you're going to say something. I interrupted.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're we're all saying the same thing. I mean, at the end of the day, and I think sales ironically also forgets what the goal is at the end of the day, because they're so focused on like number of calls and because that's what they can affect, and it is correlated. But at the end of the day, your goal is revenue, right? And the whole company's goal is revenue. When you were at Unilever, the reason why you did all that was because if nobody knew about you, nobody would buy you. I mean, obviously that's simplistic, but and I think that's where sales and marketing often forget. And so then they all get in this high level, like number of calls and like number of leads and number of qualified leads and all that. But at the end is like, let's move the discussion back. Your team, sales, Paul, your team needs to generate revenue. And how can we help you generate revenue? Don't assume that it's 600 leads a day. Like don't assume that that's the answer. And I think that's where some contention comes along, is that sales assumes that I just need more leads, right? But it's more complex than that.
There's an elephant in the room, and you guys are going to bear with me a second here. I'm reading a great book by Simon Sinek called The Infinite Game. And it's really it's changed my perspective a little bit, because what he's saying is a lot of the basis of what we're doing in business has started with a guy called Milton Friedman in the 70s, who just said, all we're looking to do is make shareholders rich. We don't care how you get there. Your only job in life is to make that shareholder rich. Now, if you think about that and you back it up a little bit, and you do go back to a point where you want to care about your employees and you want to care about your clients, if you tie those metrics back in there and you have a proper culture of because you said it, Fab, the dangerous thing is if your culture is just revenue, that's where these problems start arising, because marketing, it then becomes like a bullpit. Like people are just going to tear each other apart to try to get somewhere. But if you really instill a culture of believing in your employees, of believing in your clients, and then from that revenue will come, because you need revenue or else you can't survive. But if you treat your employees well and your clients well, and treating your employees well means if you get them to work together as a team rather than competing against each other in a toxic environment, which unfortunately a lot of large companies starts happening. If you go back to that stage and say, hey, look, we're all working for the same thing, to make the client happy, to make you guys happy. And in that same vein, if we do the right things, it's going to happen. That overall culture, if you build a culture of trust, and what I really like, he says vulnerability. If you build a culture of trust where people trust each other, and the sales team trusts the marketing and the marketing trusts the salespeople, you're going to get people that are going to work together a lot better. So sometimes we like to say, well, it's because marketing, things like that. And sales, like, no, it's because the leadership culture has instilled a way of thinking that just pollutes everything you're going to do. So I'm really I'm sort of shifting my way of thinking, because I used to think, revenue first, then clients and employees. But really, you got to take care of your employees first. They're going to take care of your clients, and then revenue is going to come in. And for a sales guy like me, who's been in the business for 3 years, it's a hard paradigm shift. It's like, whoa, so, and I think it's the same thing in other divisions too. I don't know. What's your take on that? Sorry, again, I talked too long, but what do you think?
Do you want to go fast?
Yeah. No, go for it.
Are you sure? Yeah, I think that's such an amazing perspective. It's funny when you think about it from a almost if you think about the business as an organism or an individual, and you think about how if you're healthy mentally, physically, emotionally, internally, that as a result expresses into the world. You're able to manifest things, attract things to you that are of value, and your world grows in a positive way. If you're struggling or rotten at the core, let's say, other things around you don't manifest the way they should or the way you want them to. So a business is an organism. It operates the same way. I love that perspective. It's so amazing because, if you're not happy internally, if your people aren't happy, and I would say if you keep a prospect or customer focused mentality, your customers aren't happy if you have a bunch of grumpy, angry, annoyed employees, and your prospects don't have the same experience. They don't have an enjoyable experience with your company, and they don't come back, and they don't refer you, and they don't stay with you. So that happy place has to exist internally in the same way it does with all of us as individuals, and then can get expressed out there in the world. And that revenue comes as a result of that. So it's such an amazing perspective. I love that so much.
But I'm telling you, as a sales guy, it's a tough thing to really believe at times, but it's true, and you see it in so many ways. And I think you have, to me now, like since the pandemic, I've had a really big shift in the way I think sales should be done. You still need to do activities. Fab and I talk about this, but I think the attitude you have towards the sales team or towards a marketing team or towards a RevOps team, it's really about helping them achieve their motivation. I read something else too that I loved, or I heard something else that inspired, did I say this already, Fab? But I might be repeating. Inspired employees are 2.5 times more productive than content employees.
Of course.
So, and Fab, you were going to say something. So
yeah,
what's your take?
I was going to, obviously, I agree too, right? Like, I mean, I think we've all worked at companies where there was such a toxic environment, and end result, we're all here, not talking there anymore. But I think at the end of the day, it's still, like you said it, right? Revenue is still it's just, I don't think it needs to be as, it's not an and if, right? Either or, right? It's like an and, where it's like, I'm going to make sure my employees are happy because I believe in that, and that will bring in revenue in the long run. But I still need to be following my revenue because, like you said, no revenue, I mean, there's no more employees to keep happy, right? Like, so I think I agree. I think the perspective of how we gain revenue, and this is what we were saying before, like, is it just chasing after whatever number of leads so that sales can get whatever number of leads so that they don't have to be stressed because their pipeline is full? Like, well, no, I think then you're putting everybody's so much pressure on their shoulders, and it starts unraveling. And honestly, in our realities, all three of us deal more with SMBs. A lot of them are private companies, and in a private company, that leader or that owner or those leaders and owners are capable of deciding, okay, I'm going to put my employees first, and I know the revenue will come. But what happens is, in a public company environment, which is a large part of the corporate world, well, that's where that shift really has to happen, because what happens there is revenue is still king. Like, it's great that guys like Simon Sinek are writing these books, but that paradigm shift is starting to happen, but it's not quite there. Some companies do it. I think Apple's trying to get there. I think a few companies are trying to get there, but that paradigm shift, unfortunately, usually starts at the top and boils its way down. So, as these big, huge enterprise type companies across the world start making their employees the most important part of the company, and then the employees do a great job, and then the company does really well, that's what's going to happen. But we have, and this, I don't want it to become a political conversation, but there are parts of the world, i.e. China, where all of us Western people go to exploit them so that we can have our cheap products. So we're still totally like revenue, money, and we need to, I think
those that have managed to shift away from that and do it in a better way have much better results in the end. It might not be a short game. It might not be a next quarter game, but it could be a 2-3 years down the line. You're a much healthier company that has healthy values where people aren't just dropping off like flies, or 20% of your staff is on sick leave, on long sick leave because they're unhappy. So it really needs to happen, or we're heading back to dictatorships and a horrible way of living. So anyway, sorry, another rant.
No, it's totally true.
All
and
right.
I think the pandemic has brought some of that stuff to light too,
Yeah.
which is nice, because a lot of employees are putting their foot down saying, no, like, I'm going to leave. And to your point, Paul, with your new endeavor, I mean, it's hard to find good employees because people are like, it sucks here. Why would I come here? Why would I do this? I'm smart and capable, and I'm going to go figure other things out. So if business owners, and certainly especially large organizations, want to retain good people, they need to up their game. And I think it's a new era for that, I hope. Yeah. And I think small businesses need to recognize that too. And often they don't, and culture needs to be important. And it's hard being a business owner, and culture cannot be the priority when you're, an SME. I understand that, because there's way bigger things that are on your plate. Unlike a large organization where there's like the fun police and people like that, they're actually groups set to do those things. With a small business of 10 people, it's hard to do that, but it should be a priority too for small business owners to remember.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a big institutionalized thing like fun police and but it could be the small thing, like just how we, not long ago we had this interview with TriNet, and it's just like you have to take vacation, and you can't check your emails, and it's the small things. Like the reality is, like, most people don't need these big things. They just need to be respected, right? Like, yeah, you can work from home. I don't need the reason if you're coming to me for a sick day. I don't need, you can take vacation. Yeah, I don't want to just, make sure everything is, just getting up and going, like make sure it's prepped. But yeah, go for it. I don't think you need these big things. And I think what we're all saying is the small business actually has a chance to win, because it's so much easier to just say, like, I mean, I know I'm maybe oversimplifying, but it's so much easier to say, okay, vacations are mandatory now, than, if you have like 10,000 employees and you have to go through like layers of HR and like layers of financing and and like team leaders and all that stuff. And how do you implement that? And you know what I mean? Like, it could just be like, okay, vacations are mandatory as of this summer, and that's it.
Totally. If they prioritize it, they can make change. And it can make a difference.
Yeah.
So is it fair then to say that when it really comes down to it, marketing ops and RevOps need the same thing? They need to feel that they're part of something that's going to bring an advantage to the company, and that most of the friction in the past has been that they're put in competition rather than understanding that they work as a team. Is that fair? Is that a good assumption? Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, thank you for circling back to our point.
I was wondering how we were going to tie it back in, but good job, Paul.
Yeah, I think that was a good tie-in. I think so, entirely. And I think one of the, at least from working at both a very small company and very large companies, there's a huge value in, it's super important to make your employees feel like they can operate autonomously. And I think that's where there's a lot of value in that camaraderie and team nature between those two groups, if the leadership allows them to operate and connect and work together autonomously. So it's not a top down, you guys have to work together, we're gonna be friends, let's go out for drinks and hold hands and sing kumbaya. No, it's like, hey guys, there's a problem here, we're gonna leave you to figure it out together. That cool? Okay, bye. Right? And there's so much empowerment in that, and it forces people to work together. And if people are nice, logical, emotionally healthy people, they'll work together well and feel inspired and empowered by that experience. And that has so much longevity than a forced down or a top down initiative to play nice, right?
Yeah,
right.
It's interesting you say that. So the culture has to come top down, right? Because but the actual working together has to be done at the colleague level. That's interesting.
But then also comes top down as an initiative, right? Where you have to trust, you've hired good people, hopefully, right? You have a good recruitment process. So like, give them the power to do stuff. And going back to what we were saying at the beginning, where the sales and the marketing leaders needs to work well together, that doesn't mean we work well together, so we'll lock ourselves behind closed doors and figure out our sales and marketing approach and blah blah blah, and then invariably the marketing leader comes back with some unattainable leads goal, and the sales leader is like, great, we're going to get so much more leads now. I mean, it's like, listen, we're not, just to bring revenue back into the picture, we're not attaining our numbers right now, but you know what, like, let us know let us know how, like, bring up ideas, like, and obviously you want to, you maybe more structure than that, but like, put it back on the sales and the marketing teams to be like, well, how are we going to compensate for the fact, for, like, her revenue dropping or whatnot.
Yeah.
But okay, so I want to talk about this thing. So I worked at one point in the late 2000s, 2009, 2010. I worked for a media company in Montreal, and we were the third behind everyone else. And like, so marketing was being, like, harassed to do a better job, and sales too. And then, what we realized too is we were creating original content then. So Quebec media companies were creating original content. And the brilliance of the guy who bought the company is he realized, first thing I need to have is good content. Because no matter
product, who knew?
Yeah, because no matter how good my marketing is or my sales guys are, if we're selling shit, it ain't gonna happen. So he was smart enough to say, okay, he sort of, as the leader of the company, loves content. He came from a content background, so he took it upon himself to create the content that marketing could put forward and that sales could sell. So that was the first thing. And sometimes in certain companies, the problem can be, yeah, you want great revenue, but you know what? You're trying to get your salespeople and your marketing people to push shit and sell shit. So, what kind of results are you going to get? You have to be realistic. And I think that sometimes is lost. And that's where leadership at the top level, if they have a good culture, of course, and they have realistic views, they can inspire the people by being realistic. But I've worked in too many places that were not like this place.
No.
Where they were saying, oh, you got to go and do this. And you're like, it ain't going to happen. You're asking me to sell a Chevrolet Malibu to a guy who's used to driving a Rolls Royce for the same price as a Rolls Royce. It ain't going to happen, And so if, as a salesperson, I didn't believe in it, it wasn't going to happen,
Right.
So so that culture, that reality has to be, the employees have to be inspired. So I think whether they're marketing, whether they're sales, whether they're administrative, whether they're in the warehouse, it all boils down to the same thing, that you need to believe, one, in your product or your solution or your service, and two, you have to have a good culture. And two, not one, not. I had three, two things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you remind me, like, I think it was last year I read Robert Iger, the old Disney CEO's biography or whatever, and he came up to the same conclusion, right? That when he took over, like, Disney was a little spread out, and they were, like, not doing that well at all. And he realized, like, well, our main revenue drivers are our movies, right? Because that impacts our theme parks, that impacts the TV shows, that impacts the merchandise, and so he focused on making better movies. And then, it grew again as a company. Yeah. And I think, I mean, obviously it's maybe there's not as synonymous for, like, if you're selling software, if that's all you're selling, but you have to understand what your revenue driver really is. And I think some people call it a moat or whatever, what makes you indistinguishable, right? Like unbeatable, right? What really distinguishes you is that thing that you need to focus on. And that's what allows your employees then to believe in what they're selling or marketing or servicing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But there's so much, and Alyssa, I want your take on this as a marketing person. Like there's so many products out there. There's so many things. It's not everyone who could be the best in their field. Like, so you got all these SaaSes and, like, all these, sales consultants. I'm sure there's a lot of sales consultants that are just as good as me. So how do you differentiate yourself yet in a pool of similitude? Because let's face it, people really are similar.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking that when we were talking about having a good product, so that's important, and a product that you can believe in. I think it also goes to upping your product or improving your product or service comes entirely from your knowledge and understanding experience with your prospects and current clients. So it's like the sales team has such an in-depth understanding of that prospect, because they're the ones negotiating with them. They're the ones talking to them. They're the ones connecting with them and hearing whether it's good or bad. And then the account team too, anyone who's actually separate from marketing is actually managing the accounts on a regular basis, understand what's working, like why people come to us, why people stay with us, why people are happy with us. And that's why it's so important for communication to be across all two of those departments. And especially because I think marketing sometimes at a B2B or a service-based company, or even SaaS, loses that understanding of what the people who are actually buying from you are really thinking and saying and doing, right? We're so busy pushing the message of what we think you want to hear, but we want you to hear what you want. We want you to think of us being positioning, but that positioning has to come from a deep understanding of who actually wants you and likes you and uses you. So to your point, if you have A, B, and C consultants that are all in a nutshell offering the same thing, if you actually talk to all of your clients, past, previous, current, previous, past is the same. Anyways, you know what I mean? Sure. Past, present, future clients, and you have an understanding of why they chose you, why they like you, why they stayed with you, why they refer you. That's your secret sauce that you're putting out there. What makes you different from everybody else?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so it has to be totally client focused, client, prospect, consumer, whatever you want to call them. The people who buy your shit focused, because they're the ones that matter, and their opinion matters, and their insights matter the most for sales.
Yeah, and they fit your culture too, right? So I've noticed that over the last several years that I do consulting is that, yes, I have some information that is, I have some information that is proprietary to me. But let's face it, in a marketing world or a sales consulting world, or even an administrative SaaS system, whether it's a CRM, they essentially do the same thing. So what it really boils down to is, which one do I connect with? Which one do I understand? Which one do I relate to? That Volvo will get you from point A to point B as well as that Porsche. But why is it that person wants to sit in a Volvo rather than the Porsche? Well, that's where those differences come in, and that feeling and that interconnectivity. So I totally agree with that. And it's interesting because for me, from a sales perspective, I've learned so much in the last few years, through Fab and various people I've spoken to understand marketing a lot better. Not that I'm a marketer, but I understand the role of marketing a lot better and the subtleties of marketing. Whereas when I was a sales guy, even a sales VP, I was one of those guys who thought marketing is just there to make our life better because we got to go out and sell it. And it was such a common way of thinking. And it's unfortunate, well, hopefully it's changing now, but it's unfortunate that those things are not better. Maybe they are, but hopefully that they're better dealt with. Because again, if you're trying to convince someone, like, it's not everyone who's got an Apple computer for sale. It's not everyone who's got a Rolls Royce for sale. There's a lot of those mid-market products that do something good, and then it becomes about the relationship. Or you're a full-on commodity. And you need to understand, if you're a full-on commodity and people are just buying you for price, well, that's a whole different strategy. It's a different way of selling. But if you're someone who has service that needs to be out there, but you're still the middle of the line one, well, there's room for that middle of the line. How do you do it?
Yep. And there's lots of value to be placed around even a commodity-based space of, maybe you don't have the best price, but there's other value that you have to offer that makes you really different and unique from others that you can put forward too. One of my clients was a cutting and coring business. That was the heart of what they did. So a full out, like, industrial construction based company. A lot of cutting and coring and demo is what they did. And then they started doing road work too. So they started like building based on the arsenal of trucks and toys that they had in their place, what else they could do with it on the off seasons or whatever. And maybe they don't always have the best price, but they had a whole lot of value propositions and offers for a government who was looking for a bid, or whoever they were competing with against A, B, and C other cutting, core, and construction companies. Of, they had a new level of customer relationships and customer management. They had a really intense account team who was always with you. They had really senior level people on site all the time. So they had all these other L levels. Maybe we're not the cheapest option, but we will save you money in the long run for A, B, and C reasons. So, and that's where kind of marketing can come into play in working with sales nicely and being like, well, you can spin this way if you don't have a price advantage, right? And so two brains can help people see that, or the team see that holistically.
But that's the brilliance. What you help them do is they thought they were a commodity, but you help them add value and then sort of step away from a commodity and become something, a product or a solution that comes with the service that they need to attach to it, you know?
Yeah. And see their value. And I think that's what marketing does. Like, right? That's the value of where marketing plays that finessing kind of role of how to twist it and spin it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I don't want to be that person, but I know we have kind of hard stops coming up, so I would suggest we wrap it up, and we'll talk in a month again. So I don't know if we actually talked about how should marketing and RevOps work together, but we definitely hit on some really good points and the value of employees, and obviously it sounds obvious when you say it, but it's not that obvious. And I like how you close it off with kind of like how marketing, the role that plays in the group when you really give it a chance, right? I think ultimately a lot of people don't, and they're just like, just get me more leads. Whatever the messaging is, I just need more leads. Thank you.
And to finalize that too, if marketing's job is to just get leads, you want to make sure that the two groups are working together really well so that marketing is putting messaging out there to snag the right leads. So you're not getting garbage coming in the door that then the sales team has to pill through. I met with one prospect chatting with them, and they were like, we're really struggling with the difference between when we pass off a lead to the sales team. And they really didn't have a good delineation of, okay, if we sent you all the lead sales team, you just have to be talking 24/7 with a bunch of like probably useless, non-real prospect leads. And so it's a matter of the teams working together too to make sure that they're getting really valuable leads coming in, so the sales team can be optimized with their energy and time to make sure that they're closing like 70% of the time, not because they're good or bad at what they do, but because that person's coming in as like a warm wanting to buy lead. And so that's what the teams can work together.
I think this is a great topic for the next time. I think this is what it's going to be.
No, I opened a can of worms. Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah. No, it's a great can of worms, because I agree, because what it really becomes about is how qualified is that qualified lead, and are you starting to sell in that qualification process? So yes, I can't wait for that conversation. We're not allowed to start now. Please.
We have kiddos to pick up. We've got the kiddos, but we'll try to do something earlier. So
they can walk home. They can walk home.
They're fine. They're fine.
All right, Paul, Alyssa, thank you so much. It's been fun.
Thanks, guys.
See you next month. Bye.
See you next month. Bye.